G'day folks, welcome to another episode of Learn to Paint TV. Rod Moore here with you from Moore Art School and of course Learn to Paint TV. And this week's episode we're going to do a really great little painting of a beautiful old homestead in the Botanical Gardens in Melbourne. And it's a painting that I first did some years ago, probably about 6 years ago. It was an episode of a TV show we had then called Plein Air Painting TV, and it made a really great subject. I never really felt like I captured it correctly back then. So this time around, thought we'd have another go at it and see how we go over it today. It's a complex drawing, so we need to get the drawing right first. And if you get the drawing right and you're blocking your values right, then the rest of the painting should take care of itself in theory, right? So let's get underway. I've got a 16 by 20 canvas. I've got my photo here, which I'll put up on the screen on the video. And as always with the Moore method of painting in our drawing step, what we're going to do is use ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson or permanent crimson or a magenta if you have trouble getting alizarin crimson. So I like to mix those two colors for my drawing, and starting out with a small flat brush this size here. Okay, we don't want this to be thick paint when we're drawing this out. So let's make up a little runny little puddle there of paint. And what I'm going to do is, for starting out with the drawing, so this is step one of the Moore method of painting, we need to find our key points just under the third mark. Okay, so if I measure that there, I've probably got that a little bit low. Maybe it needs to come to there. However, I think I'm going to keep it there because I've got a tendency to feel that we're going to occupy the rest of the space quite easily. And the next mark is going to be around about there. The hedge rises uphill, right? So if I get that in, that gives me a good reference point then to be able to place the other elements that we need to have in here. So I'm just going to pop that in roughly. Now I don't care if I don't get this 100% accurate. I don't want to fuss over this. It's not the major part of the painting. Okay, so it's got a little roof there, and we're going to lose a lot of that in bushes and shrubs and things anyway. It's got a beautiful old chimney here. It's one of the things that really attracted me to this scene was the old chimneys in the building here. Okay, but I'm just placing objects here at the moment. I'm not looking to get a detailed drawing, so don't get too caught up in getting that right. Now just above that point there, and this is how we're going to find all of our different points, there's a lower part of that building that runs through to about there. Okay, and now that we know where that is, we know that this wall is just slightly offset from that wall there. So I'll just run that up, and it comes a fair bit above here. So it's going to run up to about there, I'd say, and then I can run that across to about there. Although it's looking a little bit high actually, although yeah, if we split that up, so we've got that part there, we've got a little archway there, okay, and then the roof overhangs. Over here we've got this nice dark tree, and it overlays there, and it comes down over the hedge. So this hedge here, hedge runs through there, and then there's a path that works its way through there with lots of flowers. Now it's probably a little bit difficult to sort of follow what I'm doing here initially, but just bear with me while we map this out. So behind here now, we've got lots of different trees and beautiful autumn colours and so on. So we're going to have a bit of fun putting in different trees and bushes in there. And then I'll go just a touch bluer. We've got a few that are sitting out the back, occupying that space there. Okay. Now, even with that done, I'm still feeling that this building's either too big or it needs to come across slightly. Okay, so now we're going to do step two. We're going to start to block in color here and start to establish some values in our paintings. So what I've done is I've added extra paint up here. I've got more ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, quite a handful of titanium white. You probably don't need that much. I got a bit carried away. Not to worry. So what I want to do first, I'll start off with the sky. The sky is a nice rich blue tone. We'll just get up a mix. We don't want it to be pure blue. And remember that acrylics always dry that little bit darker anyway. So, and I'm picking up some of that blue, sorry, the purple mix from the drawing, just to grey it back a little bit. Okay, and I'll even put one little tiny little pinhead. You probably can't even see that. A little pinhead there of yellow in there, just to grey it back. I don't want the sky to be happy, bright blue out of the tube, because it'll jump forward too much, and that's not what we want in this painting here. We want the sky just to sit back in the distance. Okay, so let's get some paint down. It's always the exciting part of the process. We'll just start painting in this sky. It's a little on the dark side, or it always looks a little dark when you put it against the white canvas. But just to ensure that it's not too dark, we'll just add some more white in there, just mix it around. And I'll just mix that up into what we've already done. Notice I'm using, you know, some fairly carefree brush strokes. I like to keep my painting really loose. So I think that'll work. And then I've got another row of trees I'll put through there, and I'll shape them up with different colors and so on. But let's just darken that slightly. So a little bit more blue in there and a little bit more red. Okay. Okay. And when you create a new mix like that, always good to test, right? Test it next to what you've just done to make sure that there's a step in value, right? It's a little bit darker. It's not, we don't want that to be our darkest dark at this point, but we just need it to be just a step darker to bring it closer to us. A little bit more yellow in there. I can always create separation with the highlights as well. Okay. There. So when I'm doing this blocking, I'll try and just shape around the building. It doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, but just don't overpaint the building. Got that little mark for the chimney there. It's a matter of not getting too carried away. I'll just tap in, what I'm doing there, I'm just tapping the hairs of the brush, create little bits of foliage and things like that. You know, so I see so many beginners, they get little tiny brushes and they want to try and paint every leaf. You can do that if you want, but it always ends up just a little bit rigid and uptight. If you just let the brush do the work, just tap, right? It creates little clumps of foliage for you. And again, that's just skill you have to practice, but the more you practice that, the better you'll get at that, yeah? Okay, enough rambling on. Let's get some painting happening. Okay, top of that hedge there. Now we're going to go to our darkest dark. Okay, get the blue and the red in there. Notice that I'm just using lots and lots of paint. It's a big canvas, there's lots going on here, and I don't want to fuss around. I just want to block it in. Okay, so keep in mind what we're doing here, I'm just blocking in colour and establishing a values pattern at this stage. I'm not trying to paint, you know, details at all, right? So don't get caught up at this early stage trying to make it look like something, right? As long as when you get that initial drawing in, if you get the shapes right and in the right spot, and then you block in the right tone, right, the right value, then it will start to take shape as a painting. What I'm going to do here is something really reckless. I'm going to block in the underpaint for the grass, and I am going to use our yellow ochre and our alizarin crimson and just mix up an orangey tone for that, and just block that in. Now, if you've seen the photo, you might be thinking, Rod, why on earth would you use orange and yellow ochre when it's all green grass and flowers and so on? And in response to that, I'd say, that's a really good question. If anyone asks that question, I'll answer it for them. that in. Okay, now with that blocked in, I've got my darkest dark over there, so I'll just get another mix of that dark, and I'll counterbalance it just by darkening up that corner, just to offset. Okay, welcome back folks, Rod Moore here with you again. We're now going to do step 3 of the Moore method of painting, which is of course our details, finishing touches, highlights, that type of thing. So we're going to really pull this painting all together in this step. Now, this is all dried off quite nicely. I've stood back and had a good look, and you know, to me it looks like it's working. We've got a nice structure and nice composition happening in the painting so far. So let's press on. I'm going to start working on the little cottage and the main house, and we'll spend a bit of time on that. Just pull it into focus, and then we can work around the setting around that. So I'll start off with my larger brush here, and I'm going to mix in the shadow tone for in here and the roof, and we'll start there. So we'll get some blue and some red. Okay, it's quite a dark shadow tone. I'll just push it slightly to the blue side, only a tiny little bit of the white in there at this stage, and I'll ignore the chimney in it for the moment. I can come back and tackle that soon. There's a detail later on. Like so, that gets that one in. Probably didn't quite get the angle right there. I'm not going to let that be a problem. Get some more shadow tone. And I'm going to run this line down here just a bit lower. Run that through there. And I'll make this just slightly warmer. So it's got to come out to there. So I'm just sort of thinking my way through what we're doing here as we go. Just that roof in there. Go a little touch warmer for the roof at the top here. So I've lowered the overall size of that building down again from our original drawing. That, which I think is going to work better. I'm going to raise the hedge up a little as well. Let us now find some highlighty type tones for in here. So we're going to go blue, yellow ochre, okay, and some white, and start searching for our first tree type tone. I'll get a little bit of red in there, a little bit of red just with the other two primaries. We'll just grey that back. Now, that's probably too dark. I need more white in there. And a little bit more yellow. Okay, now when you see it on the palette there, it looks too light, but it might be right. So, always with the, when you're doing highlights, just take a tiny little bit of paint on the tip of the brush, like so. Pardon me. And then let's see if we can just find these highlights on the back here. The light's sort of coming from here, that way. Or it's probably more sort of overhead. It was a bright, sunnier afternoon in Melbourne when we did the filming of this episode. So yeah, the old Learn to Paint TV. It's been a few years since we did that. Now this is just way off in the distance. We don't want this to become a feature. So we're just encourage it to sit backwards. Okay, which I think that will do. Now we'll come a little bit darker and get in another row in here. Okay, now I'm just going to put down our middle sort of value here. I'm not going to highlight just yet. Go a little bit yellower and redder into that mix. Gives us a nice bit of variety. Just start working that into the hedge here. I want to keep plenty of that shadow in it, but if I just start to work some of that in like so, a bit of a crisscross pattern. What that'll do is it'll keep plenty of the shadow side of things coming through. Now there's a little gap runs around about there, so I'll leave a gap. And it goes up to about there. I'll explain what the gap's for in a moment. Okay. Just mix it in with what we've been doing. I don't want to go too strong with this straight away, but you can see that even with it mixed in there, it's quite a punchy, strong colour. It's just catching on the top of that hedge. Like so. Get back to a little bit of work now. I can feel that we're getting our getting some nice things established in here, but I do feel now that there's a need to push back. A bit of sunlight catching in there. Okay. Now let us explore these chimneys. Now this pinky tone, I probably just need to lighten it back and a touch of blue in there. But I want it to have a little bit of that pink in it, so I'll just mix that in like so. And I've got a feeling that that will work quite nicely, just in for these chimneys here. And the the way we're going to fix that is we're going to put this grass on. So we're going to get a chunk of the blue, yellow, a little bit of the yellow ochre and red, mix all that together. Okay. Some different tones in there. Probably wants to be a little bit brighter overall. And then I'm just going to just see how I'm flattening that brush against the canvas there. Okay. That gives us that nice grassy area in there. So hopefully it's all starting to make a little bit more sense. It's not making sense just there. I need to just tap in a little bit more bushes in there. Okay, now there are clumps of bushes and things, flowers and all sorts of things in here. So I'm just going to indicate those. I'll leave a little bit of the earthy tone in there as well. I'm not going to try and paint them 100% accurate, obviously. You can, but as I said earlier, it's not quite my style to really fuss with things too much. I prefer more of a broader approach to the way I paint. And there's no right or wrong, you know, it's whatever you like as your style. If you want to be finicky over the details and fuss with them, then you can do that with this painting, no problem at all, right? Like a few different tones of bushes in there, flowers and so on. And we do have, interestingly, there is a nice blue flower just in here. I'm going to replicate that with, whoop, don't want too much paint on that brush when you're doing this. So we've got a nice brighter green up in that area there, in one of the trees, and then the same up in here. Okay, so I'm going to get into a couple of little spots of highlight here that I think we need. Just white with a little hint of pink in there. I'm just going to down there. Maybe some of the lilac-y flowers in here. Couple in there. Maybe one splash of brighter, more brightness on the grass. Through here. And I think that's around about where we're going to leave this one. I'm reasonably happy with it. The only thing I feel what maybe hasn't worked is the shape of this building. It should have been a little bit longer and maybe not as high. Apart from that though, I think it's an overall not a bad little painting, and there's a bit more to it than some of our projects that we do at Learn to Paint Club or Learn to Paint TV, but you know, you can pretty easily work your way through it, I think. Got our nice distant trees, stronger colours in our centre of influence, centre of interest, and these bright, warm foreground, and I think the painting works pretty well. So definitely a good one to have a go at. Might challenge you, might not, but put a little bit more focus into getting the shape of the main building right. Sometimes doing these, you know, and filming at the same time, don't always quite nail it the way we'd like to, but not to worry, it's all a learning experience. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next time on Learn to Paint TV. Make sure you drop by our website, www.learntopaint.tv. Till next time, happy painting. Cheers.